Good evening. The question has been asked why it is that so few mystics in the world's history have been healers. Why is it that one can have actual conscious contact with God and still not become a healer? The answer is that almost all of the mystics of whom we have actual records have had a religious background. And this it is that prevents their becoming healers. In other words, their religious background has instilled in them the belief that God is a great power and that God does something to other powers called sin or disease or wars or lack. There is that belief in all religious teachings that you can turn to God and have God do something for you. And this, of course, is the barrier which makes spiritual healing impossible. First place, God has no such relationship to man or to the earth. And unless one knows the nature of God and the nature of man, it is an impossibility to attain the necessary consciousness which results in healings. Now, I must illustrate that for you. God, the great I Am, Spirit, soul, consciousness, that which we call the creative principle of man and of the universe, the creative, maintaining and sustaining principle, is infinite intelligence, divine love. And into this realm of God, nothing ever enters that defileth or maketh a lie. Nothing ever enters the kingdom of God that needs healing, improving, reforming, supplying. God is of too pure eyes to behold iniquity. God has no consciousness whatsoever of a world that needs improving, of a world at war, of a world in poverty. Imagine, if you can, what would be the nature of a God that could watch these last 3 wars through which we've gone and do nothing about it. Just let it go on, aware of it. Heaven forbid that there should be such a God. If God had the power to stop these wars, these bombings, the poverty, the slavery in some parts of the world, and didn't stop it, God would be a fiend, not a God. And if God didn't have the power to stop it, God certainly wouldn't be a God. One or the other. If God had the power to stop it and didn't, it could not be God. If God had the power to stop it and didn't, God would be a fiend. Not even a human parent could watch this carnage and permit it to go on if they could stop it. Therefore, unless an individual can understand that God is infinite good, the infinite intelligence of the universe, divine love, one has no understanding of God, no correct understanding of God, even if one had a feeling of God's presence, which mystics do have, an actual awareness of it. Yet there is a blind spot in them, a barrier which prevents their overcoming the old belief that you can look to God to do something for the people of earth. When you understand God as Spirit, omnipresence, you understand then that man is all that God is, that God constitutes man, and all that the Father hath is thine. And then you understand why there is no need to pray to God for anything, no need to expect anything of God. The need is that we come into the orbit of God, the nature of God, the realm of God, by becoming sons of God. As a human being, the creature, you are not under the law of God, neither indeed can be. If so be the Spirit of God dwell in you, then do you become the sons of God. Then are you under God's grace. As this creature living in a world accepting the belief in two powers, the Master well describes us. A branch of a tree that is cut off and withereth. That is the entire human race. Until the individual, by abiding in the Word and letting the Word abide in them, dwelling in the secret place of the Most High, living and moving and having your being in God, is reestablished as the Son of God, living by grace. Surely Saul of Tarsus was not living by grace. He knew great miseries and great unhappiness. Hatred, persecution filled his consciousness. But St. Paul could say, I live, yet not I. God, the Christ, liveth my life. I live by grace. I can do all things through Christ. In other words, now I have contact with my spiritual source. Now I am consciously one with the source of all life, all being. And I can now relax, take no thought for my life, because now there is this Father within that performeth everything that is given me to do, feedeth me, leadeth me beside the still waters, maketh me to lie down in green pastures. None of this is true of the creature, None of this is true of the person running their automobile into brick fences, stumbling down the street with alcohol, robbing banks, inflicting evil upon each other, brawling in their homes or in their business. This is not the Son of God living under the grace of God. This is a branch of the tree that is cut off and withereth. But because of the grace of God, that same individual may later say, though my sins were scarlet, I am now white as snow. Though I was the prodigal eating with the swine, eating husks, branch of a tree, cut off, withering, now I am restored to my Father's house, and once more wear the ring and the robe of authority and sonship. And so with us, though we were mortals, though we were sinners, though we lived the normal life of a human being, sometimes good and sometimes bad, sometimes rich and sometimes poor, sometimes healthy and sometimes sick, by virtue, first of all, of a divine grace that turned our thought toward God, and the continuing grace which led us until in some specific moment there was an awakening. And in that awakening, we were restored to our original relationship as one with the vine. The vine is one with God. And now, all of the Godhead bodily is flowing into us, through us, and out from us by virtue of our conscious oneness with God. Now, as long as we entertain a belief that God can do something for this branch that is cut off from the tree, this withering human race, all of this praying, all of this church going, all of this being religious amounts to nothing more than making us good humans. It can do that. Indeed, it can. To receive correct instruction can always make us good humans. And it's far better to be a good human than a bad one, although very often it is the bad one who has the best chance of being restored to his Christhood because he's driven, whereas the good one usually can be so content and so peaceful in that human goodness. Just as disease, serious disease, is more responsible for people being returned to divine sonship than health ever was. Now, I would like for a moment to return to last night. I'm sure that many of you must have thought of our glass of water with its floating piece of ice. And I'm wondering if you also consciously remembered that the water is H2O and ice is H2O. The substance of the water and the substance of the ice are the same. And all that is of water is of ice. Whatever water has, ice has. These are not two separate substances. These are not two separate qualities. Ice and water are one. Two different forms, yes, but they are one. One in essence, one in substance, one in quality. The ice does not turn to the water for anything that the ice hasn't already got. And yet the water, in this particular case, is an activity of the ice, since the ice as form has no activity of its own. Now we bring you to an exact relationship between man and God. It is true that God is invisible to human eyesight, but God is the substance in which we live and move and have our being, and God is the substance of which we are formed. Therefore, the qualities of God are the qualities of man, and yet God is always the greater, for God is the law and the activity of man. To understand this makes you see that in your spiritual identity, all that God is, you are. And therefore there is no need to turn to God for something. There is only the need to recognize this relationship and then create within yourself a vacuum so that you can say, I of myself am nothing. It is only the quality of God which is my being, the substance and essence of God, and it is the law of God which governs me, guides, directs, instructs. Then you can understand why the Master could say, Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me, for I and the Father are one, and yet I and the Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. The nature of our being is the same as the nature of God's being, for we are one. And yet, relaxing in that oneness, we permit the invisible to uphold us, sustain us, move us, feed us, clothe us, house us, direct us, instruct us. We learn to relax and let God's grace govern us. Now, there's quite a difference between this and thinking of ourselves as something separate and apart from God, having to ask God, instruct God, influence God. Quite a difference. All the difference between successful spiritual living and non-successful living of any type. God's grace is my sufficiency. This is a truth. But God's grace is not brought into experience by this praying to God in the sense of asking, pleading, seeking, but rather God's grace is brought into our experience by relaxing into an atmosphere of, Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. Now try for a moment to understand that at this very moment you live and move and have your being in God. Try to understand that in this room, right here where we are, we are relaxing not in a chair and not in the air, but we are relaxing in God, the invisible. You can't see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, smell it, but through faith, through an inner conviction, you can understand that the place whereon I stand is holy ground, that where I am God is, that God is neither low here nor low there, but the kingdom of God is within me, right where I am. And then, feeling that, relax. Now you know that the God that made this universe, that formed it, that gave it its laws, is certainly capable of maintaining and sustaining your identity and mine unto eternity. Therefore, it is necessary to relax in it, closer to me than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. And now, since God is the infinite intelligence of this universe, let God's intelligence move us as it will, feed us, clothe us, house us, direct us, resurrect us, restore the lost years of the locust, return us to the Father's house. Let thy will be done in me, without any idea at all of any need for telling God what we need or what we would like, without any idea at all of advising God as to what we should have or what we think we should have or what even we would like to have. Not at all. Let us acknowledge God as infinite intelligence and divine love and say, I'm satisfied with that. I'm satisfied to be what you want me to be, to do what you want me to do, to be where you want me to be. Thy grace is my sufficiency. Let me so understand the nature of God that I too can say, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I know that he leadeth me beside the still waters, without my asking, without my directing. But I must relax in his consciousness. I must relax in his spirit, in his wisdom, in his judgment, in his will. And this in mystical language is called self-surrender. Yielding, dying daily, not having a will of my own, a desire of my own, not even a care of my own, but always living in the realization I live and move and have my being in God consciousness. It is closer to me than breathing. Therefore, it knoweth my needs before I do, or he knoweth my needs before I do. It is his good pleasure to give me the kingdom, and I can rest in that word, relax in that word. Then you will see that you are now developing a healing consciousness, because now you are not seeking a God power, you are living in a God power, and you are not acknowledging a power that has to be overcome. Now you are getting back to the fullness of mysticism, in which we learn that evil has no existence at all outside of the mind that believes in good and evil. And that is, of course, what has been called the carnal mind, or mortal mind, mesmeric mind, and other names it has in different literature. But the mind that is composed of good and evil, that is capable of good and evil, that believes in the power of good and evil, this is not the healing consciousness. And so the healing consciousness only comes to those who arrive at a state of consciousness in which they can live consciously one with God in full and complete confidence that God is the mind, the intelligence, the wisdom, the love, infinite, therefore needing no help from us, and that in this God consciousness there is nothing to battle with God, nothing to war with God, nothing for God to overcome. Sometimes it is helpful to have a specific statement. And the one that is the most helpful to me is remembering Paul's statement that the carnal mind is enmity against God. I can laugh. It brings a smile to my face, and I can relax. How foolish can you be? Enmity against God. Where is God's infinity? Where is God's all power? And who created this enemy of God's? God made all that was made. God looked upon all that he made and found it good. Where then do you get a power to war with God? And you will find, as you are called upon for help, or as you attempt to give help, that you will only succeed in proportion as you reach an inner state of grace in which you do not battle error, you do not war with mortal mind or carnal mind, you do not seek to use truth over error, you rest in this word, you abide in God, and in the realization there is no enmity in God. There is no power in anything that God did not make. Therefore, there is no need for a God power to overcome or destroy or remove or reform. When you are abiding in the consciousness of God as omnipresence, here and now, where I am, as you abide in the consciousness of God as the creative, maintaining, and sustaining power of the universe, as you abide in this consciousness of God with no opposition, no enmity, no powers to overcome, something takes place within you. It is a fourth dimensional experience or a mystical experience in which there is a real realization. Of course, God is all. It's an actual experience, no longer just an affirmation or a statement in a book. It is an experience. Of course, how could there be God and something else? And in that moment of spiritual union, and for that is really what it is, in that moment of spiritual union, everything that had existence as evil dissolves. Now, so that you do not misunderstand this, let me repeat. In the world of human beings, there are two powers. On the physical level of life, there are two powers. Physical force or material force can be used for good and it can be used for evil. On the mental plane, the power of the mind, the power of thought, can be used for good and it can be used for evil. And that is what you witness as you look out upon this world. That's what you're aware of all the time. An automobile is a good material force while it's behaving in its right place on the road and under good conscious direction. It becomes an evil material force the moment it's out of control and probably hit someone. Electricity can give you power, warmth, cold, but it can kill. Everything that is of the material realm can be used for good or evil. And the mind of man can be used for good or evil. Always has been. Always has been. Back in the earlier days of the Aborigines of Australia, you had them with such complete knowledge of mind power that they could bless, but they could also curse and kill just with the power of their mind. The Hawaiians had the good kahunas that could heal, and the bad kahunas who could kill. There have been sects of people in most parts of the world where there were original natives, primitive people, and all of these knew the power of mind and how to use it for good or evil. Now, this knowledge of mind was lost, so that the Western nations never knew about it. And even to this day, there are very, very few people in the Western world who know the nature of mind or its powers. I might say here that psychologists and psychiatrists know absolutely nothing about the power of the mind. They are a million miles even from getting to the kindergarten stage of a knowledge of mind. But there are a few people who have experimented, who have not been limited by the misknowledge of psychology and psychiatry. And these people have discovered the powers and abilities of the mind. In some places, there are plans afoot to use this power for the good of mankind, and in other places, they are now planning behind very plush doors to use it destructively for mankind, for selfish purposes, which of course will be evil purposes. Now, at the present time, however, very little is known about the mind in the Western world. But of this you may be sure, mind and the power of thought can be used for good. In this last 75, 80, 90 years, mind has been used for healing work, and it has performed good healing works. So then, in the material world, you have two powers, good and evil, in material force. In the mental world, you have two powers, good and evil, mind power, thought power. The secret of life is that in the presence of God, in the presence of spiritual consciousness, neither material power nor mental power is power. They both dissolve in the presence of spiritual consciousness. When an individual brings himself to Jesus Christ, the discords, whether of sinful nature or sickly nature, dissolve. The limitations of the body dissolve, disappear. So in our modern day, all spiritual healers can bear witness to the fact that they know nothing of the nature of any power with which to overcome sin or disease or lack or inharmonious human relationships, but that in proportion as they can attain their inner stillness without any sense of power, the discords evaporate. We have, as the simplest of problems, colds and grippe and flu, and every metaphysical healing is a proof that germs are not evil powers and that infection or contagion cannot operate. Now remember, it does operate in the human scene. It stops operating the moment it comes up against spiritual consciousness. On no other basis can healing take place than that these destructive powers of germs disappear. Day before yesterday, I received a letter from the States. 2 or 3 months ago, a lady wrote asking for help. She had cataracts and was so blind that she could not walk on the streets without someone to lead her. And the day before yesterday, I received a letter written in her own handwriting without wearing glasses. Now, you have heard me say so often, I don't know how to heal. I wouldn't know how to remove cataracts. I wouldn't know how to restore that woman's eyesight. No. I know how to abide in inner stillness and to remember that in the presence of God, there is no evil to be healed or removed or touched or reformed. That there are no powers but spiritual powers, and there are no laws but spiritual laws. Therefore, laws of matter or laws of mind cannot operate. In that consciousness, something happens, and outwardly we call it healing. So it is. You know how many of you have written to me in these past years, and you know that sitting 10,000 miles away from you, no power was being exerted over you or in you. And now you must understand what did operate. The realization that there is no material power and no mental power that is a power in the realization of God as one infinite all power. Now that is what constitutes spiritual consciousness. Spiritual consciousness isn't anything mysterious. It is something sacred, it is something secret, but it isn't mysterious. Spiritual consciousness is your consciousness in proportion as you no longer give power to physical force or mental force. In proportion as you understand God as the only force, and then take the attitude of Jesus Christ, resist not evil. Or visualizing, if you can, Jesus turning to this crippled man and saying, what did hinder you? What did hinder you? Rise, pick up your bed and walk. In other words, there's no power holding you there. And one with God is a majority. Therefore, the consciousness of a Jesus, realizing that this which the world calls material power or mental power, either one, is not power. In the early days of my practice, I think that unconsciously I accepted the fact that material power wasn't power, but that mental power was power. It took me about 2 years for the revelation to be given me that mental power isn't any more power than material power. As a matter of fact, there wouldn't be any material power if there wasn't some kind of a mentality to move it, to be the power. And so really, mental power and physical power is one. That's why it has often been said that thoughts are things. But actually, mental power is no more power than physical power is in the presence of the consciousness which knows that spirit is the only power. Spirit, God. And spiritual law is the only law. And spiritual life is the only life. In proportion then, as we realize that, the transformation takes place in what we call the outer world. But it isn't an outer world, because there isn't any outer world. The only world there is an inner world. God is consciousness, one infinite consciousness, and because you and I are conscious, this is definite proof that God is your consciousness and my consciousness. Therefore, we have one and the same consciousness, all of us, God. Therefore, everything that exists is embodied in this one consciousness which is God. But now go a step further, the one consciousness which is my consciousness. That is why you are embodied in my consciousness as this class. I am embodied in your consciousness as teacher or friend. Don't think we are outside of consciousness. Oh no, we are consciousness itself. But because there is only one consciousness, that is my consciousness and yours. Therefore, everything is subject to this one consciousness which I am, which you are. Now follow this. There are states and stages of consciousness, and those of material state of consciousness believe that physical force is power. And they do everything through physical force. They might even earn their living through physical force, physical energies, physical labors. Then there is the person who has gone a step further and has more of a mental consciousness. And this person begins to earn their living through mental powers and exert mental powers, personality, individuality. And then, of course, there is the spiritual consciousness, the one that we recognize as that mind which was also in Christ Jesus, the consciousness which does not live by might or by power, not by physical might, nor by mental power, but by my Spirit. This is spiritual consciousness. The individual lives not by might, nor by power, not by any human effort, but by my Spirit. Now then, if we are of that physical consciousness and give power to physical might, then, of course, we are living in fear of drafts and getting our feet wet. We are in fear of germs, weather, climate. If we have gone into the mental state of consciousness, we probably want somebody's good thoughts to bless us, and of course we fear somebody's bad thoughts because they might harm us. We may be uncomfortable in the presence of people who we think are sinners. We don't like their thought upon us. Or we may even fear a mental malpractitioner because we have given power to the mental powers. When you come to the spiritual consciousness, this is where you acknowledge that only God is power, only the consciousness which is not divided, the consciousness that sees with a single eye, one power, one presence, one being, one cause. The moment you reach that, you reach life without effort. You reach life by grace. Because now you don't have to consciously direct God consciousness. Now it performs its functions in you and through you, and you merely become aware of what it is imparting to you. Now, let us follow this for a moment. I've used this illustration many times. Let's use it again. This hand is absolutely dead. It can't go up, it can't go down, it can't give, it can't withhold, it can't punch, it can't pet. Here it is, and here it will stay forever, unless I. There's the big secret. I must move this hand. I must direct it. I must instruct it. I must empower it. Now, if I am down here on that physical or mental level, then I can do this for good or for evil. Now, I am choosing. If I have attained even a measure of the consciousness that God alone is power, then this hand is moved not by personal me, but by the divine I that I am, and never for evil, and never for error, never for destruction, never for harm, because I am not consciously going to move it. I am going to let it be moved by the consciousness which is God, which is the consciousness that I am. Now think of that. When you personally, humanly, are going to move your body, you can move it where you want, how you want, and you can move it for good or evil. The choice is within you. But in proportion as you come to the realization that God is the only consciousness, and God is one power, infinity, immortality, eternality, you will find that your body is being moved. You consciously aren't moving it, it is being moved, and never for sin, and never for disease, and never for death, and never for old age. It is being moved in accord with the grace of God. When the time comes to pass from this human scene for greater experiences, it will be a passing, not a pushing out. Now, God is the one and only infinite consciousness, the all-good, my consciousness. Therefore, everything within the realm of my consciousness is God-governed, God-maintained, God-sustained, God-fed. God, divine consciousness, is the substance of all form. There is no evil form, there is no destructive form, no harmful form, no injurious form, for God is the substance of all form. Now you present to me a claim of infection or contagion, germ. But in this inner vision, I see God as the substance of all form. Therefore, there can be no destructive form, no injurious form, no harmful form. All form is of the name and nature of God. All form is of the quality of God, the activity of God, and exists under the law of God. And then I reach that inner stillness, and then we prove the germ was not destructive. I'm not denying that there are germs, there may be, but I know that they can't be injurious, they can't be destructive, not in the realization of one power, one intelligence, one love, one life. You present to me a claim of marital discord, and I say that God constitutes individual consciousness. Therefore, there can be no battle in consciousness, no disagreement, no separation. There can be no opposing interests, no opposition. God is infinite consciousness, the consciousness of you and of me, and there can be no discord between me and thee, for we are one. Whatever blesses me blesses you, because we are one. Anything that would injure you would injure me, for we are one. But God is the one. God is the one of you, and God is the one of me. And in this oneness, there is only the qualities, the quantities, the activities, and the laws of God. And nothing shall by any means enter this consciousness which I am, which you are, which he is, which she is, that defileth or maketh a lie. There is but one. And then again that inner stillness and silence, and the seal is placed on that treatment, and so it is. Regardless of the name or nature of a claim which is brought to your awareness, you have to start with the fact that God is one. One presence, one being, one power, and all that God is, I am, and all that the Father hath is mine. Therefore, God consciousness is my consciousness, and nothing can enter my consciousness which despoileth, defileth, or maketh a lie. And so I know that God is the substance of all form, God is the activity of all being, God is the law unto all creation, and in him is no evil. In this truth of oneness, one being, one presence, one power, there are no opposing powers. And so we are dealing only with the belief, not your belief or mine, the universal belief in two powers, good and evil. But if you do not accept two powers, then you do not have the belief. And one with God is a majority. And where there is no belief in two powers, there is spiritual harmony, spiritual health, spiritual wholeness. This is why I caution the students, don't be satisfied if you've had a healing just because you have good health instead of bad health. Remember, good health can always become bad health. No, even good health must be transcended until you know that there is neither good health nor bad health. There is only spiritual health, God health. In other words, spiritual harmony, spiritual wholeness, spiritual completeness. Never be satisfied with just physical health or mental health. Never be satisfied with financial abundance. Because financial abundance can all too quickly be financial lack. Don't be satisfied with financial abundance. Translate it and realize that the only real abundance is the presence of God. God's presence is grace. God's presence is supply. God is the substance of all form. God is my being. That's why I shall not want. And then, when you are abiding in this truth of spiritual substance, it will appear outwardly as the fulfillment of all your requirements, and there'll always be 12 baskets full left over. But not if you are going to count dollars or pounds or properties and think you have a sufficiency. Oh, no, no. Time makes many changes. But if you recognize that in the kingdom of God, God itself is fulfillment, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, freedom from all sense of lack and limitation, then you have made God your supply, and your supply will be abundant. It will be infinite. But only if you've made God your supply. Only if you've made God the health of your countenance. Don't be satisfied because the heart beats the right number of times. God is the health of my countenance. God is my supply. Don't be satisfied. I see in today's paper they're starting a new movement to be sure that we all buy concrete shelters. Now we must all go out and buy concrete shelters. Don't be tempted. Don't be tempted. There's no place where God is not. If you have made God your abiding place, your dwelling place, then that's where you are, and that's where God is. And let's see somebody try to destroy God. God is infinite divine consciousness. Therefore, God is your individual consciousness. And this consciousness is the law unto your life. Don't try to direct it. Be satisfied that it is so, and rest in that word. God is infinite divine consciousness. Therefore, God is my consciousness and your consciousness, his consciousness and her consciousness, the consciousness of friend and of foe, universal, divine, omnipresent being, God consciousness, the law unto all creation. And when you rest in that, it picks you up and transforms the mind, the body, and what is called the outer experience, but which now you learn isn't outer at all. It's all taking place within you.